Okay, so this is the talk on data modeling. Last week we gave an introduction to the various types of databases and how to talk to relational databases using the SQL language. And this time we'll talk about how do you turn your app idea into a natural database thingy. So in my demo app, I'm going to keep a track of the people who signed up for this workshop. Sorry. And then each user has one or more languages, and each user has a GitHub account, and each user belongs on a team. So that's the app I'm building. So intro to data modeling. So what is data modeling? And you can think of it as kind of a blueprint. You know, blueprint's the architecture thing, that kind of, for the database where you just set up what your database is actually going to have. And it represents what are the stuff you're going to save in your database and all the objects in your database, like tables and column names and foreign keys. And what is ERD? And it's a visual representation of your database. So last week we showed you the code to create a table, and then this would be the ERD diagram of what the table looks like. So you would list the table name and the columns in it, and then the funky line in between shows the relationship between the tables. So first thing is ERD stands for entities relational diagram. So entities are things that you're saving in your database, and your entities will depend on your app and what your app needs. So it's kind of think of like the things that your app needs, like can be people, objects, concepts, and it relates to your table is what we call entities is what in database terms is the table names basically. So in my case, for my demo app, I need to save users, I need to save teams, languages, and GitHub information. And then there's these things called attributes. And attributes are properties of an entities. And in relational database terms, those are the columns in your tables. And I know for, at least in Mongo, they don't call it tables, they call it collection. I don't remember what the individual, documents. So the terms are a little different, but similar concept where you have a thing and then you have fields or columns inside. So for my demo app, I know I need a users table, and I'm going to just save the name. I'm going to have a languages table, also a name. Teams also have a name. And then for the GitHub profiles, I want to keep track of stuff like number of repos they have, number of stars they have, and the username. And for you guys, you know, this will depend on your app. For your users table, you might have tons of stuff like first name, last name, address, tap card number, whatever. So it will all depend on your app. And then we get to the relationship part. This is what makes relational databases, you know, relational. And then relations are represent how the entities or the tables relate to each other. And this is done through foreign keys. So in my demo app, I know I have this thing for users. I know there's languages, so the user is related to the language because the user has languages. User has a GitHub profile, so it's related through that. And then the user also belongs to team. So there's some type of relationship between all that. Like, there's no relationship between languages and GitHub repo. Well, you could, in theory, but I didn't do that. And then languages, no relation to teams. And then there's this thing called, how do you say that? Cardinality? Yeah. Describes a type of relationship. And there's 3 main types, and one-to-one, one-to-many, and many-to-many. And I'll do, next slide will actually show what this stuff is. So this is the one-to-one relationship, and you can use like actual words as you're designing your database to describe this. Like, well, I know one user has only one GitHub profile, and then I know that the one GitHub profile only has one user. So, so when you do the lines, that's what that vertical line represents. It's basically one. So those are the relationships. So when you actually create the table, when you have a one-to-one relationship, you would have to add the user ID to the GitHub table. And that becomes your foreign key of the parent item. And our parent item here is users, and the child one is GitHub profiles. So you would add the user ID from users to the GitHub profiles. And actually, I've never actually used a one-to-one relationship in any of my projects, but this thing exists. But John has, so he's done, like I had to ask the mentors, like, has anyone actually used one-to-one in their production app? And he's like, yeah, I have. So you will hear about, well, you might hear about this in theory, but so. And you might use it in production, so good for you. And this is much more common, where you have like one user only has one team, but a team has many users. So how do you represent that in the database? And this one, to do that, is that you would have to add the one that has one of, you would have to add that team ID to users, and then that's how it relates to teams. And then, so you have the vertical line, which represents one, and then the multiple crow feet looking thingy, V lines, means multiple. So to read this diagram, what it's saying is that the user has one team, and the team has multiple users. Any questions? Nope. Either I'm an awesome teacher or you're so confused that you don't even know what question to ask. So I'm not sure which one it is because no one says anything. Yes?
Making this diagram like a standard part of the process that people do?
You don't have to do this diagram, but if you want to talk to other people to describe your database, then this is how you would describe it. So like as developers, when you see this, you know what's going on. Okay, sure. So usually when you create a table, you need a unique item in each table. So in that case, that's your, you set that as your primary key. It is most common to let the database auto-generate your primary key. So then it's just an ID field, and it has some random number or value as the primary key. So how the other tables then, like if I'm on the users and I want to go, oh, I want to know what team that belongs to, then I need to refer to the primary key of the teams table. So team ID in the users table is the foreign key, and it actually corresponds to the primary key of your teams table. So let's say user, pretend I have a user 1 named YN, and my team ID is 1. So that means in the teams table, there's going to be a team with the ID of 1. What name? That any clearer?
Yeah.
Oh, he does.
Do people use UML professionally, like seriously, or is that just something in school that people are like, oh, UML?
Well, sometimes like when you're designing your database and stuff and talking, you'll just draw a quick table. Just you might not do the full, like you wouldn't list all the fields because you kind of know that.
Okay.
But to quickly think about the relationship between the tables, you might do a quick sketch of that. And there are some frameworks that will do this for you, or some plugins you can do this. So some people design this diagram first, have it generate the SQL, and then use that to create the tables.
I've done it in like MySQL. You could do this like drag and drop UI thing, and then you could link to the actual database. Like I've done
Yeah.
some.
Yeah. So it depends on what your company, if you get to a job, what your job tells you to do. Your job tells you to do it this way, do it that way. Especially if you're a junior person, don't tell them, oh, you should change the way you do things on your first day. Not, that doesn't look good. Then another relationship is many-to-many. This one is a user as a user. You know many languages. And the language can also have many users. So, so in theory, you would think your table would look like this. You just have many-to-many. Sorry. Because remember, we're just referencing an ID to get to there. But if you have multiple IDs, then you can't just put that in your column. So what you actually need to do is to add a middle table, a join table, so that it has the related columns from the other tables. So in this join table, which is the language users, you would list the ID of your language, of the two tables that you're trying to join. And then you would have the ID from users. Any questions on this? Awesome.
So the language user will have a new ID.
Yep. You can set it up to have an ID, or you can set it up to use the two IDs or the multiple IDs and have a multiple column primary key, which is, more difficult. So I just usually just let it use a single ID and auto-generate that. But there are other places that might use the combination of these two IDs as their primary key. So this is what the final schema would actually look like. So you have your teams, your users, the join table, your languages, and GitHub profiles. So links. Okay, so there are links. These are some videos that I saw that explain this in more detail. And I like the ones I linked to. There are lots of them on YouTube, but I like this guy because I think he teaches very beginners. So the concepts. So that's why I linked to these, and slides will be up after the class.
Which one? You mean all of them?
All of them.
Okay.
I think it was yeah. Well, at least the first 4, and then I think the last 2 he repeats some of the stuff in the first 4.
What's his name?
I forget. I just found him this morning as I was searching for stuff. Because I saw the other videos, and because data modeling is actually a huge topic, you can do like your entire career just on databases. And some of the other courses talked about stuff which, yeah, you need to know, closer to job-wise, or that's your main thing. But I'm like, oh, geez, people are going to be so confused. So luckily I found one that talks about just the basic concepts. So for your app, my suggestion is do the diagram first. I also used the thing that I used to do the diagram was, what did I use? It was something on, it was something free. Lucidchart.
Yes.
So you can sign up for an account for Lucidchart, and they give you like free documents, but you can only have 60 things in there, 60 tables or something. So if you have more than 60 tables on your first app, you can do it. I'm not going to stop you, but I'm just going to go, okay, they use 60 tables in the first app. Yes?
If you're not doing something like really advanced, Google Drive works really well. Because you're just doing the boxes, the text, and the arrows.
But that works too. I just found this because it was free, and
I
then
like
it
this
does.
chart
It does.
too. It has more detail. It
Yeah.
has more.
Yes. So if you, yeah. So if you want to, my suggestion when you do your app, try this exercise, and then send it to one of your mentors, and then ping them in the Slack channel. Hi, this is my app. This is my thing. This is what we're thinking of, how to design our database. Does this thing look right? So before you ask the mentors, you guys need to try it first. Then we'll help you. So that's my suggestion. And if you're using Mongo, oh geez, I've never actually done Mongo database in a real app. I've only done it in tutorials. I think some of the mentors have done apps in it. I'm not sure. Anyone here use Mongo? Oh, okay. So how the relationships work is a little differently, because in Mongo you can either store the IDs, or you can actually store the entire object inside another object. And the way you decide on that, there was a YouTube video I saw that described of when to decide when in Mongo do you just store the ID versus when do you store the entire object. So that's the only advice I have, is to watch that video to help you decide when you do which. Any other questions? Okay, break time. Come back at 3.